Well, I think if we don't understand the role that the radical religious right has played in public media today, we're missing the larger picture. There are those who want to turn back the clock. There are those who want to deny civil rights and human rights to all American citizens, to set up their own conservative, theocratic kind of government. And I think it's absolutely imperative that progressive-minded people and progressive-minded organizations come together and combat this force. I think that Dr. King, if he were alive today, would certainly be fighting for our ability to have free expression and to have a voice. I believe that a voiceless people is a powerless people, and therefore it is incumbent that we have free press and free voice and free expression in America in order for America to be America. In order for us to be what we are promoting across the world, all citizens must have the ability to feel that their voices are being heard. And whenever that is negated, we are pulling away from the fabric of our democratic society and our democratic principles. And so it is important that we gather in this place and in this space and in this time to lift up free press, free speech, free expression. It is what makes America America.
One of the things that the FCC is supposed to do is promote diversity in our media. I'm wondering if you can talk about the importance of diversity and how religious issues are talked about in popular media. And do you think we're getting enough diversity in terms of how we talk about religion in this country?
Clearly, the media has been hijacked, in my opinion, by the radical religious right. And so diversity has been thrown out the window. It's only their model and their modes and those who think like they think. We have allowed our diversity to be diminished greatly because we have not exercised and allowed other religious voices and other cultural voices and even just other diverse voices to be heard in America. Therefore, I would say that rather than moving forward, when it comes to free expression, diversity, open society, we have actually been moving in the opposite direction and going backwards. What we need to promote through the FCC and through legislation is legislation that creates the atmosphere for, and even if necessary, mandates diversity and make sure that it is funded as well. I mean, it's easy for Congress to mandate diversity, but they don't fund it. They don't make sure that it happens. They don't enforce the legislation. So you not only need legislation, you must have an oversight and make sure that the legislation is carried through. And that's what we've not had in our country.
The civil rights movement was a struggle for basic human rights and equality. Do you think it's frivolous to compare, a movement like that with the media reform movement?
I have no doubt. Dr. King understood the power of media. The civil rights movement, honestly, did not take off until the cameras came down, until the reporters came down. It was a nice, little thing happening with a few black folk and some progressive white folks down in South United States. Until the media came down and showed the water hoses and the dogs and showed young people getting arrested, until the journalists started writing about what was happening in Alabama and Mississippi, the civil rights movement did not take off. Dr. King understood that, and that is what propelled the civil rights movement. So I have no doubt that Dr. King would celebrate the civil rights movement and the media reform movement being almost synonymous, that you can't really have one without the other. And that when you're talking about civil rights, you're talking about all of America. You're not just African American, not just Latino, or not just Asian or any particular segment. When you're talking about civil rights, you're talking about basic civil rights for all Americans, for every American citizen. And Dr. King certainly would be singing the praises and in chorus unanimously with that notion.
Some Americans might say that that people of color have made enormous strides in terms of how they're represented on media. They would say, well, look at Danny Glover. There he is with, with what's his head on Lethal Weapon, Mel Gibson. We turn on MTV. All the most popular artists are often people of color. What's the problem?
Believe me, we have made some gains, but we have a long long way to go, particularly when you're talking about a culture of ideology, a culture of legislation, a culture of setting public policy. We're not just talking about entertainment. We're talking about things that affect our lives, that affect housing, that affect education, that affect employment, that affect health care, that affect the war, that affect human lives. And we got to be clear that we don't have enough women voices, we don't have enough African American voices, we don't have enough Hispanic voices, Latino voices, we don't have enough Asian voices, we don't have enough that represents who America really is out there saying and speaking and being heard. We don't want to limit it just to athletics and entertainment. We're talking about people who have political acumen, people who understand issues, people who have traveled around the world, who have something to say about the world, about this country, and about the direction that we are headed in. And I think you will find those people among all ethnic groups in our society. But the reality is, when you talk about minority voices, they're not being heard in those arenas.
Just to circle back to talk again a little bit about spirituality and religion and how it's represented. A lot of us, like people like me, like latte drinking, blue state kind of urbanites, we get really nervous about, religion or Christianity these days, in part because we only see this kind of radical right-wing fringe you're talking about. Is there such a thing as progressive Christians? Is that possible?
Absolutely. There are a number of progressive religious organizations, not just Christian. I mean, Jewish and Muslim and Hispanic. And many of us have been meeting in Washington, meeting in New York, but nobody knows about us that much because the mainstream does not carry our conferences, does not listen to our voices. We have become marginalized. But I think in the last 3 to 5 years, that's beginning to change. And I think it's going to change even more dramatically now, as we have seen even recently. 700 days ago, America had a very different view of the war than it has today. So it doesn't take a long time for public opinion to change. We have to make sure that progressive religious voices are out there, and that when we have these conservative commentators on our televisions, on our radio show, that we must also at the same time have progressive voices on our televisions and on our radio shows and in the printed media as well. Because otherwise we give the impression that this is the voice of America, the voice of hate, the voice of division, the voice of separatism, the voice of war, the voice of death. That is not the voice of America. There are progressive-minded religious people there of all religions who have a lot to say, who have traditions and history and culture, and whose voice is equally as important as those of the radical religious right. And it is high time that those voices are pushed forward as well.
My last question for you. One of the things we struggle with in the media reform movement is how do we make these abstract, policies and boring FCC proceedings meaningful to people and actually connect it to their reality and to what they see when they turn on their computer or turn on their radio or turn on their television set. Do you have an analogy, or if you were going to explain this to your 12-year-old son or daughter about why this stuff is important, what would you tell them?
I would just look at our own history. You can look at the women's suffrage movement and the role that media played. You can look at the Vietnam War and the role that media played during that time. You can look at the civil rights struggle and the role that media played. You can look at the war in Iraq and the role that media has played. How media has helped to shape public policy. How media has helped to shape legislation. And I think the children are much smarter, and American general public is much smarter. It is a matter of giving them the information. It is a task of education. And we need excitement in the media reform movement. I mean, we are very cerebral, and we can analyze everything. We need some excitement. We need some speakers. We need some folk who have some charisma, folk who can make you laugh and at the same time can give you information. Because America is not as excited about just information or about cerebral kind of analysis. The other side, they have exciting speakers. They have folk who have charisma. They have folk who are passionate about what they believe and have a way of expressing that excites the masses. We got to identify those people in our media reform movement, and we've got to call upon them and tap their energy, and we got to make sure that they are taken care of, that they are protected, and that we get them out there, because everybody wants to be a part of something that is moving forward, that seems to have life and vitality about it. And until we give it some life and vitality and exuberance and some laughter, we're going to be lackadaisical, and that's the way we're going to be perceived by the general American public. But I think that we have what it takes. We just got to begin to promote our own so that we can accomplish the ends that we're striving to achieve.
Thank you so much. That last answer was so good. I have to do a little follow-on, because what you said about the need for more charisma and excitement, and it's not just about ideas. Nobody ever, stormed the Capitol because somebody had a great cerebral idea. Can you connect that point to what you were saying earlier about diversity? Because when I do these interviews, I get a stream of middle-aged white men. And you know what? They're great, and they're kind of dull.
I just did a presentation. This is my first time coming to this conference. I was overwhelmed. The reason I'm late, because I couldn't get out. There's something about the preacher, and we're talking about who's setting the agenda of the media, the radical religious right. You cannot fight religious leadership with politicians, and you cannot fight religious leadership with intellectuals. You only fight religion with religion. And we got to have people who are equally passionate, people who are equally knowledgeable, people who understand the issues and who have the ability to communicate the issues. If we're going to create a movement, that's what Dr. King brought, that's what Jesse brought, that's why we're still listening to him now, that's what Al Sharpton brings, and there are other, Jim Wallace, I think as well. There are white, charismatic leaders out there who are not getting the right kind of visibility or promotion, that if we bring them in, we can create a movement. And it doesn't have to be just for cerebral. We're smart too, but we know how to translate the intellectual into a passion that connects with people. And when you connect with people, they'll follow you to the end of the earth.